Welcome to our monthly angel connection, where each month we focus on one angelic force that governs the energy of the month or the zodiac sign associated with it. The purpose is not simply to learn about the angel, but to understand the specific spiritual frequency it represents, so we can consciously connect to that energy and activate it in our daily lives. One of these elevated forces is Archangel Tzadkiel, whose name means God's justice, and who governs the lunar month of Leo called Av. Tzadkiel is the angel appointed over the universe, commerce, and judicial systems, supporting us in business, trading, negotiating, earning, sharing, and transforming negative belief systems. One of the greatest areas in which Tzadkiel can support us is in transforming the stories we tell ourselves and the beliefs through which we interpret our lives. It's all around the stories that we tell ourselves, which are often negative, and more often than that, not even true. We are by nature storytellers. We learn that way, we pay attention that way, and that's why false stories are so dangerous. We often have regrets about different times in our lives. The great danger here is that if you're living in the past, or you're living and waiting for something to happen in the future, you can really waste your whole life. Often the story that people have the most is the story of a victimization. We then meet stories of regret, and we are burdened by those feelings. That can really plague us throughout life. Most people go through life wishing they could erase the most difficult times of their lives, when we know those are the opportunities for real growth, real happiness, and real freedom. But to do that, the first thing is not to want to erase anything, and second, call yourself out on the lies that you tell yourself. The reality is that almost every single truly positive thing that has happened to us has been in some way an effect of something negative. Sometimes great things, sometimes small things, but that's actually the way the system works, because every experience molds and shapes us. It's not just the initial story, it's that we keep building upon it and upon it. For every lie you tell yourself, you build the whole story on it. Why do our brains work the way they do? And why do we create some of these narratives, these negative loops? We always have free choice. You can change a thought. A thought is just a thought and absolutely can be changed. Kabbalistically, we are meant to and can get to a place where the majority of our daily thoughts are positive. I know it sounds beyond you, but it's an absolute ability that you have. If you do spiritual work, really do this introspection and use the tools, you can get to a place where the stories you're telling yourself and the majority of the thoughts that you're having are positive ones. And that is transformational. There is a difference between self-defeating beliefs versus negative thinking patterns. Unlike self-defeating beliefs, negative thinking patterns are not always with you. Rather, they only surface when you're faced with an issue. It is also known as cognitive distortions. These negative thoughts come to mind during times of stress and reinforce your self-defeating beliefs. A self-defeating belief is always there. We always have these beliefs, and the cognitive distortions, the negative thinking patterns, come to your mind during times of stress to reinforce what you believe. Cognitive distortions are simply ways that our mind convinces us of something that really isn't true. And it's helpful to know this, because this is how you can really shift your consciousness. Your brain's priority is your survival, not your happiness. So it was actually an evolutionary advantage that helped our ancestors survive by avoiding danger, which was to remember the bad things that ever happened to us. This negativity bias is still active in your brain today and can get in the way of your happiness, increase your stress and worry levels, and damage your brain and health. Each of us experiences the world uniquely because our brains add their own subjective tint, meaning every experience we have ever had, painful or otherwise, fades into how we experience the present situation. These memories we hold on to color our experiences. Every experience we have is going to take on a different color depending on your life experiences and how you derive meaning and purpose from the things that have happened to you. So the first understanding is that all of us are innately wired to have a negativity bias in memory. rather than seeing the positive in the present. And certainly, as we look back at our history, we are hardwired to remember the bad things and sometimes even remember them as worse than they were. Knowing this and knowing that we don't have to hold on to it in the same way, it's important because we are not at the same risk in those ways as we once were. We can choose to learn from them, from these experiences, while still remembering the experience, but use them in a different way. It's also important to realize that unless you're actively fighting this nature, it will take hold. You will naturally see more negativity than positivity in your current reality, even when that's not the full picture. And as you look back on your life, you'll tend to remember more of the negative experiences than the positive ones, even when the positive outweighed them. So it's important to realize that unless you're consciously working against this negativity bias that we're all born with, you'll continue to experience reality through that lens, both in the present and in the way you remember your past. It is the brain's job to hold on to these memories to protect us. And it really lies just below the conscious level. It's like an awareness. It's not something that we're fully aware is happening. If you ask most people, do you see reality? They would say, yes, of course, I see positivity, I see negativity. I'm an objective viewer of my life. But what science tells us is that that's absolutely not the case. We are actually negative viewers of our lives, both current and past. Michael Berg shows a story that clarifies the evolutionary source of this. If you were a hunter, gatherer, and there were 4 caves, and in one of them there was food, and in 3 of them there were bears, it was much more important for you to remember which caves had the bears because they could kill you. If you didn't remember where the food was, you would likely find it somewhere else. So remembering dangers and therefore negative experiences was of the utmost importance for evolutionary reasons. Unfortunately, to some degree, that is still the state of every single one of us. So accept it. That is where we are unless we are proactively engaged in spiritual study and practice that takes us in a different direction. Naturally, that's where we are. And our teacher, the Rav, always reminded us that consciousness is everything. It's what we can affect and what we can change, but it's all up here. In India, when training elephants, handlers begin by chaining one of the elephant's legs to a tree. And over time, they gradually decrease the size of the chain until all it takes is a flimsy string to hold the elephant. It's not the string that restrains the massive animal. It's his mind. Your mind limits you in the same way. It can pick apart and criticize every move while holding on to evidence it has collected to prove that something is true, even when it's not. Your mind can keep you stuck and hold you back, just like the string does for an elephant. If you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Book now with me one-to-one session in angel coaching and communication coaching. To learn more, email or DM me. Enjoy the video. For an elephant. The second idea is that every single one of us is being held back because of negative beliefs and false fears. Just as the elephant is held back by seemingly nothing, our minds are holding us back from greater things than we are currently experiencing. As we think about where we are, most of us, to some degree, all of us, it's really important to realize the shift in thought patterns and what it entails. First, we need to appreciate the fact that this is one of the biggest pitfalls. We do not have perspective on what we see or do not see. For the most part, we believe that we are both seeing reality and seeing all of reality. In order to begin to shift from negative beliefs and negative thought patterns, it's important to diminish our certainty in our vision. Because if I don't first accept that my vision is imperfect, and that, as a matter of fact, I am seeing only a tiny fraction, not only of spiritual reality, but even of physical reality, then it will be much more difficult to break negative thought patterns. Michael Berg shared that many times people ask him, why did this happen? Whether positive or negative. And often, when it's negative, his immediate thought is always, I'm not smart enough to know why it happened. I do have an innate belief that ultimately it is for my benefit, but I'm not foolish enough to think that I either see everything or can understand everything. In the book Fundamentals 10 Keys to Reality by Frank Wilczek, in the preface to the book, he says, our unaided perception brings in only a few silvers of the reality that scientific investigation reveals. So even on the most basic fundamental physical level, we see only a tiny fraction of physical reality. He says, consider, for example, vision. Our sense of vision is our widest and most important portal to the external world, but it leaves so much unseen. Telescopes and microscopes reveal vast treasure troves of information encoded in light that ordinarily come into our eyes unrecognized. Moreover, our vision is limited to one octave, the span of visible light from an infinite keyboard of electromagnetic radiation, which runs from radio waves to microwaves to infrared on one side, and from ultraviolet to X-rays and gamma rays on the other. And even within our one octave, our color vision is blurry. While our senses fail to perceive many aspects of reality, our minds allow us to transcend our natural limits. It is a great continuing adventure to widen the doors of perception. Many of us are plagued many times with negative thought patterns. This is not something that is fixed by listening to one lecture or by saying, okay, I'm going to stop. Because the reality is that this is so fundamental and evolutionary fundamental to who we are, that you really have to take this as life's work. And it begins with realizing how limited your current vision is, even of physical reality. So if you're seeing so little of reality, how silly would it be to make judgments about it? If you realize you're seeing such a tiny, tiny fraction of physical reality, what are you jumping to conclusions about? What are you deciding about? What are you being negative about? Especially when there actually is a benevolent force, a positive force that permeates everything. But the first step is to break down the ego thought that I am seeing everything. I'm not even seeing a fraction of it. What we need to do, to be doing, if we are to break away completely from negative thought patterns and the negative stories that we tell ourselves, is to really rethink the way we think. It begins first with a diminishment of humility. I don't even see physical reality. Then he goes on a little bit further and says, babies construct a world model that accounts for what they experience within the bounds of their perception and environment. For practical purposes, that is the right plan to cope with the everyday world. It is efficient and reasonable when we are children to take lessons from the everyday world. But modern science reveals a physical world very different from the model we construct as babies. If we once again open ourselves up to the world, curious and without preconceptions, if we allow ourselves to be born again, we come to understand the world differently. Science is saying that you cannot have a true perception of reality with the way you have been thinking and seeing up until now. He says that in order to perceive reality, you have to be born again as an individual and really push aside the thought patterns that you grew up with, that you think you know, and that you think you see. There's a parable about a worm in the middle of a rotten apple. The worm wakes up in the morning. He is born into this rotten apple. So in his mind, he's saying, what a dark, rotten, mushy, ugly world I am born into. Until one day he breaks through the shell of the apple and sees, oh my God, just this whole world that I didn't know existed. And every single one of us, no matter how much wisdom one has, realizes, and this is the beauty of life, that there is an infinite amount more to see and to know that exist. And therefore, to make negative assumptions and negative judgments about what I am experiencing is really silly. I am experiencing such a small part of what actually exists, not just out there in the world, but even inside here in my own life. And not only what you're experiencing, but what you think about yourself. If we know that we are unmet potential, that's what a soul is. We come like a slab of clay, and it's up to us through life to form and mold whatever we envision ourselves to be. We tend to doubt our abilities, capabilities, opportunities, and experience. We don't know how to create or how to mold, so we just stay a slab of clay. We have more neurons in our brain than stars in the universe. We need to appreciate not only who we are, which is important, but even what we are. Rethink the way you think. Let go of the ego thought, I see everything. We don't see even a part of it. And therefore realize the silliness of making judgments about what we are experiencing, certainly judging it as negative. A way to actually do that is to be awake enough to see everything, not just in the sense of the opposite of being asleep, but to be awakened, to be born again, to be aware, to be alert. These are questions for greater wakefulness. Number one, do I need to change path? If you have a negative thought, if you simply ask yourself, what is the opportunity there? Whether it is in work, health, habits, or relationships, simply asking yourself that question is going to lead to some kind of solution or change. Number two, what areas of my life are on autopilot? Parenting, friendship. Number three, what am I becoming more of? Are those things that I want to become more of? All those thoughts that you have, is that who you want to become? Because the more you think that thought, the more that becomes who you will be. The last quote from the book, he says, in our rush to make sense of things as infants, we learn to misunderstand the world and ourselves. The reality is that we have misunderstood our world and we continue to misunderstand ourselves. There's a lot to unlearn, as well as a lot to learn on the voyage to deep understanding. The process of being born again can be disorienting. But like a roller coaster ride, it can also be exhilarating. And it brings this gift to those who are born again, in the way of science. The world comes to seem fresh, lucid, and wonderfully abundant. One of the gifts of Archangel Tzadkiel is helping us move beyond limited perceptions and self-defeating beliefs so we can begin to experience the abundance that already exists within us and around us. One of the effects of our often constant negative thoughts and negative thought processes, like the story of the worm, is that we stay so small even though we're not. We are abundant and our world is abundant. But one of the effects of a negative thought pattern or a negative loop is that we stay small, when in reality we and the world around us are abundant. When you realize that part of breaking free from negative thought patterns is awakening some humility about what we're saying, and therefore how silly it would be for us to make judgments. This is one of the deeper aspects of Tzadkiel's energy. Tzadkiel governs justice, and true justice requires seeing beyond appearances, beyond assumptions, and beyond the limited perspective of the ego. The second part is the understanding that unless we retain how we think and really take the opportunity to remove negative thoughts, we will remain in this sense of darkness, in this sense of lack, not fully accepting the reality that we and the world around us are filled with abundance. The month of Leo, governed by Tzadkiel, gives us a unique opportunity to challenge the beliefs that keep us feeling small and disconnected from that abundance. We spoke about the evolutionary reality of our negativity bias, but spiritually as well, there is a force that unless overcome will naturally enable us, almost force us, compel us into thinking negatively. We come into this world to choose growth, to choose goodness, to choose blessings. That's our free will. And therefore, to allow free will, we are also given this negative inclination, as it's called in the ancient text. That is the force inside our minds, inside ourselves, that sees the negative, whether it is there or not there. naturally it causes us to see ourselves as negative, whether that is true or false. That force inside ourselves pulls us in that direction. So without any change or movement, we will, as human beings, because of this innate spiritual force, as well as the evolutionary force, wind up seeing ourselves, our world, our life, and our life story as negative. But the purpose is to fight against it. When you fight against it, you earn the ability to see things as positive. You earn the ability to have positive thought and therefore a positive view of your life. You experience the world around you and yourself. Truly, by challenging the negative force and the negative thought, that is the evolution of you. That is actually how a person goes from one level of consciousness to a higher level of consciousness. This transformation of consciousness is one of the greatest blessings available during the month of Leo. It is not merely about changing circumstances. It is about changing the lens through which we see ourselves and reality. Two profound tools. On a spiritual level, what feeds negative thoughts? It's very simple. If you're thinking negatively about somebody else, hatred, anger, jealousy, that thought is an energy. As we said before, if you have a negative thought, that is not something that is here and gone. That energy remains. So if you ask yourself, what is the fuel that feeds my negative thought loop? It is all the negative thoughts that you have about yourself and about other people. How many times throughout the day do we allow ourselves, unfortunately, because it is our nature and something we must fight against, to say, oh, this person is negative, that person is negative, this person is horrible, and so on and so forth. But when you realize that part of this work is to starve our negative thoughts, then the next time today, within the next 24 hours, you have a negative thought about another person, it is a force that most people are not even aware exists, or that it is something that controls them. Why is it this way? Because we are meant to earn. If we did not earn our blessings and our growth, then we would never actually be satisfied by them. We are innately made up of the kind of consciousness that needs to earn in order to truly enjoy what we receive. And therefore, this is part of our battle. Part of our human battle is against these innate negative inclinations. To think negatively about ourselves and to think negatively about others. By fighting that force, that is a big part of earning our growth, our blessings, and the light in our lives. This is also one of the gifts of Archangel Tzadkiel. Tzadkiel helps us recognize where our judgments of ourselves and of others are limiting our ability to receive the blessings that are already available to us in a very practical way. You're thinking about your cousin and you have a really nasty thought about them, or you think they did something really bad. Out of self-interest, say to yourself, if I allow my mind to think negatively about other people, then I'm creating the fuel from my own negative thoughts about myself, about my life, and my own negative thoughts about my life. Now, don't I want to be in a place where my view of myself, my thoughts about myself, my experience, and my life are positive? I want that. Imagine what life would be like if you were able 100% of the time to think positively no matter what happens. That's freedom. And I really recommend testing this, and you will see that as you fight to limit your own negative thoughts about people, the fuel that generates the negative thoughts about the way you view what is happening in your life and the way you view yourself becomes more and more diminished, because it no longer has the fuel to propel it forward. You could want to have positive thoughts. You could want not to be sad every day. But if you're still fueling what we call the negative inclination through negative thoughts about other people, then you are creating the fuel that will forever generate your own negative thoughts about yourself and about your experience. Starve your negative thought patterns by limiting to the degree that you can, and we can, the negative thoughts that you develop toward other people. And certainly, if you can, the negative thoughts that you have about yourself. Because those negative thoughts are the fuel that will continue to feed the negative thought pattern that you have. The month of Leo challenges us to become more conscious of the thought we repeatedly allow into our minds, because those thoughts eventually becomes the lens through which we experience reality. And second, and this is a Kabbalistic tool as well, the Kabbalists teach that when the mind is being empty and not being used in a positive way, it becomes much more open to negative thoughts. They actually refer it to as what's called ruach shtut, which is a spirit of stupidity, of nonsense. One of the reasons it's so important to study spiritual wisdom is because if you leave your mind vacant, other things are going to occupy it. And those other things are usually not positive. Among the many benefits of really pushing yourself to study is something that the ancient sages wrote about thousands of years ago. If you do not actively fill your mind with wisdom, you are absolutely leaving it as fertile ground for negative thoughts. The same is true with our mouth. When people use their mouth for negative things, speaking badly about others or cursing others, through that action of speech, they drew down that energy. Versus if you use your mouth for prayer, words of kindness, and connecting, then you are manifesting that energy as well and inviting it into your life. The same is true with thoughts. This isn't simply about saying, I'm going to study wisdom because I enjoy it. It's actually an imperative. You have to realize that unless you actively pursue wisdom and make sure that every single day you're studying something important, your mind will not be filled with what elevates it. One of the areas governed by Tzadkiel is the transformation of limiting belief systems. The study of wisdom is one of the most powerful ways to replace old patterns of thought with greater consciousness, clarity, and possibility, because that fills the mind. The more you allow your mind to ruminate on important and positive things, to think about wisdom, to think about how much you love somebody, to think about appreciation, all of those things are important. The mind will not stay idle. It is either actively filled by each one of us with positive thoughts, wisdom, love, and appreciation, or left alone. It becomes fertile ground for what are called thoughts of silliness, negativity, bias, and negative thought patterns. If you find yourself in a negative thought patterns, then first thing is to starve of its fuel. Limit to the degree that you can negative thoughts about others. The second, fill it with wisdom, fill it with love, fill it with appreciation. Fill the mind. Do not allow it to remain empty, because of a vacant mind is fertile ground for all kinds of what are called thoughts of silliness, that negativity, bias, and those negative thought patterns. We all know that shutting down the voices is not simple or easy, and it is hard to push the thoughts away. But science now tells us that our thought patterns inform more than just our daily decisions and how we live life. They actually affect our health and our lifespan. This comes down to telomeres. They are repeating segments of non-coding DNA. Do very important things, such as making sure our genetic material doesn't unravel. Most importantly, they shorten with each cell division, helping determine how quickly a cell ages. When they become too short, cells stop dividing altogether. They are not solely responsible for our overall aging processes, but they are a huge contributor to what causes us to age. And not only that, they are actually listening to us. They listen to the thoughts that we think, the way we eat, how we feel about what we eat, and everything we do for that matter. They take direction from our dominant thoughts. This is really powerful. A shift from negative thinking to positive thinking can quiet, literally slow aging process. As our teacher, the Rav, again always said, consciousness is everything. What you think turns into what you do. And based on this science, it also influences how quickly you age. There are 3 things that are especially harmful to our telomeres. The first is cynical hostility. It is defined as high anger and frequent thoughts that others cannot be trusted. So it's not just that you're angry, It's that you are full of rage, that somebody cut you off, stole your time, disrespected you, or wronged you, and you can't move past it. People with high levels of cynical hostility tend to have higher rates of cardiovascular and metabolic disease, and they also have shortened telomeres. The second is rumination. When a stranger is rude to you, of course it's upsetting. We've all had experiences like that. Usually you get over it after an hour. You come home, share it with your family, laugh about it, and move on. But rumination is when you can't get past what happened. You think about it over and over again. You replay the interaction, draw conclusions, and create more negativity around it. This affects our heart rate, our blood pressure, and our vagus nerve, which is responsible for calming us down, supporting digestion, and regulating many other important functions. The third is a pessimistic attitude. How often during your day do you spend time in that space? A study from the Harvard School of Public Health found that people who scored high on pessimism inventories had shortened telomeres. If you find yourself trapped in any of those loops, you are not only shortening your enjoyment of life, you may also be shortening your lifespan. Some people live a long life but hate every moment of it. Others want to live fuller, but they indulge in this kind of thinking and behavior. And in doing so, they diminish the quality and length of their lives. There are so many reasons to actively pursue the transformation of negative thought patterns. This is one of the great gifts available through the consciousness of the month of Leo, and through our connection to Archangel Tzadkiel, the ability to challenge limiting beliefs, transform judgment into wisdom, and experience the abundance that exists beyond our habitual way of seeing. Every single one of us is meant to and can live a life where the majority of our thoughts about what is happening to us, about who we are, and about our past are overwhelmingly positive. Physically, spiritually, and mentally, it will be better for us. But most importantly, it is actually the life we are meant to be living. If you go back to those places in your life that are dark and painful, and that you keep thinking about over and over again, stop and ask, how can I learn from this? How can this be used to help me grow, change, and see life differently? And if you do, you can leave the pain behind and come to appreciate having had that experience. So let's now take a few moments to connect with Archangel Tzadkiel and internalize this wisdom so it becomes a living part of our daily consciousness. Please sit very comfortable, uncross your arms or legs. You can look above eye vision and slowly close your eyes. Take a slow, deep breath in and gently exhale all the way. Again, deep breath in and let it all go. Bring your awareness to your mind. Notice the thoughts that move through it. Notice the stories you have been telling yourself about your life, about your past, about yourself, and about others. Without judgment, simply observe. Now imagine a beautiful light surrounding your mind and your heart. A light of clarity, a light of wisdom, a light of compassion. Invite the energy of Archangel Tzadkiel into your consciousness. Ask for help in releasing false judgments, limiting beliefs, and negative stories that no longer serve your soul. Silently say, "Help me see more clearly. Please help me see beyond appearances. Help me see beyond fear. Help me see the blessings, a opportunities and growth that are already present in my life. Imagine every negative thought beginning to dissolve. Every story of limitation softening. Every belief that keeps you small losing its power. Feel yourself becoming more open, more awake, more aware, more connected to the abundance that already exists within you and around you. As we enter the month of Leo, may we receive the gift of greater vision. May we transform judgment into understanding. May we transform negativity into appreciation. May we transform limitation into possibility. And may the energy of Archangel Tzadkiel help us see ourselves, others, and our lives through the eyes of wisdom, compassion, and truth. Take one more deep breath in and slowly exhale. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. Thank you and have a very beautiful month.